Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, I tried it at home. Didn't go so well, but I lived. I lived to tell the tale. Yesterday was my birthday, and so I got another year of life before I reach a respectable age. Anyhow, what am I really going to talk about here today? I watched a video by Robert the Narrator. Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master is the actual channel name, and I love his videos. They're always really engaging and enjoyable. And this one was on his shortcomings as a game master, and so I identified with a whole bunch of them. I really enjoyed the video, but there was one right around the middle of the video that I wasn't really sure was really a shortcoming, and so I want to talk about that. He talked about the idea that sometimes, he'll have players kind of ignore or not pay attention to the story or the plots he has in mind. They just don't find them interesting. They don't interact with them. And sometimes he felt like he maybe shouldn't let the things go on the way they would normally have progressed, like the basic consequences of ignoring these things, because he felt like sometimes he was being a little bit too vindictive, or it might be in a spirit of revenge occasionally. He wanted to be careful about that, which I agree. You have to be careful not to amp things up, to say, well, the heck with you, you ignored my precious story. However, the word story, he kept using it. I think, given the context of what he was saying, to me it just sounded like logical chain of events. Because certainly in most games you're free to do whatever the heck you want. If it's not a one shot, the players are pretty much exploring what is interesting to them. And it's no secret that I really like a world that's kind of consistent. These are words I didn't think of when I was younger. But internally consistent, things make sense, events are kind of, I guess deterministic would be the right word. And, one of the things I like to do when I'm setting up some kind of campaign or some kind of world is I like to have a timeline of events. Like, what's going to go on? What are the big events that are going on in the backdrop of the world? So maybe it's like Nation A in 3 months is going to invade Nation B, and then after a 6-month siege or whatever, maybe they invade nations C and D at that point, etc. And these are things that just involve maybe thousands and thousands of people and layers of political intrigue, and nothing save like some kind of bizarre turn of events and some kind of weird Hail Mary pass, and whatever else that the player characters do will really affect these in a meaningful way. It's just one of these big things that's happening in the backdrop. It's not something that the players can actually influence all that much, but they can see it coming and they can act accordingly, get out of the way of the speeding train, so to speak. There's other things that are more immediate. And these are things they might be able to have some kind of impact over. I always like to have, one of the things I'm thinking of for upcoming campaign is the idea there's some kind of archaeology thing going on somewhere where eventually they're going to uncover, something they wish they had, and then, unleash some kind of Lovecraftian, abomination at some point. So there's a timeline for that. Maybe the players will be able to influence that a little bit if they figure out what might be happening. But of course, it's inadvertent. So, I like to have a whole bunch of little, I guess, deterministic ideas. Everything gets set in motion. And I know in the absence of the player characters what's going to happen. Then, for me at least, you start to deal with things like contingencies and tripwires. Interesting term that Ron Edwards put in Circle of Hands. But these contingencies, okay, well, if the players or anybody removes, guy A, who is going to interact with, guys, B, C, D, and E, and F, okay, then what happens? And I have an idea of, okay, in the absence of this guy, or should this person get knocked off, or should this particular MacGuffin be removed, or should this you get the idea. You have these concepts in your head. What's going to affect what, and the players become this kind of wild card. And after after they go and just cause mayhem in the world, every once in a while, for me, I have to kind of reevaluate. Okay, well, where are all the particles now? What directions are they heading in? What's if the players do nothing else, what's going to happen deterministically, and then move on that way. And these tripwires you put into place, because Ron Edwards, in Circle of Hands, talks about these things that will unleash mayhem, but they don't always have to be that way. Just some kind of contingency. If this guy never delivers this letter to this woman, well, what happens? But what happens if he does, because that's what's going to happen unless somebody intervenes. And they can intervene in all manner of ways. So, for me, but the thing is, the flip side of that, like Robert was talking about, is should the players become aware of things and ignore them, okay, well, guess what? These, consequences are going to happen. And it's not to be vindictive, it's not to be mean, it's not to railroad them, but it just makes logical sense. And so maybe it's that Nation A invades Nation B, and they're in Nation B because they haven't figured out that they should leave. Or maybe it's something a little bit more immediate, where they could have influenced something. It's not like they have to, but now that if they've chosen to act or chosen not to act, there are consequences. There's always consequences, and you shouldn't have to coddle your players, I don't believe. And it's not always, you're not out to get them. It's just that's what's going to happen. You better put on your Nikes and run or go do something else at that point. And there's two concepts that I've talked about and I've heard talked about a whole bunch, which I think some people find them contradictory because I've certainly said one or the other, and people bring up the other one and say, well, what about this one? And so the two concepts really are, number one is like the game is about what the player characters did. It's that local interaction, what happens in these game sessions against whatever the backdrop happens to be. However, at the same time, the second point or concept would be that the game world does not revolve around the player characters. Reality doesn't change just because the player characters find this interesting instead of that interesting. They can certainly interact with this. That's still going to go on. It doesn't revolve around them. And these may seem contradictory, but they're not. What do you think about all that?